USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the USCHO Weekend Review podcast for Sunday, February 24th, 2019. It's episode 20. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Before we jump in, a reminder that this episode is sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four. It's coming up soon, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 for more information. Well, Jim, what a great choice it was to pick UMass at Providence for the game of the week. A 3-2 win for the Friars in a terrific game. You were there to cover it. Tell us what happened.
Well, I'll tell you. Number one, the atmosphere was fantastic, and interestingly, it was Providence's first sellout of the year. Interestingly, Nate Lehman credited UMass for making a sellout. They brought a lot of fans, and they were pretty loud, but it was a great atmosphere in the building. And then the teams delivered, and this was a game. It was a heavy game. It was a skilled game. There was a lot of plays up and down the ice, but I thought both teams actually did a very good job of handling the opposition's transition. There wasn't a ton of huge transition plays, barring a Cale Makar breakaway goal, of course, which I feel like there's one of those every game. It lived up to every ounce of the hype that you could have put behind it. And these two teams have played 3 times now. All 3 games have been 3-2 scores, and the team that has been the better team on the ice has lost all 3 games, ironically. And that was the case last night. I thought that UMass was very good most of the game, especially in the third period when the game was tied at 2. They had some glaring opportunities, and Hayden Hockey made an incredible save on one. There was a missed net and then a sliding defenseman to block the rebound opportunity. And then, just as it happened the last 2 games on the other side, Providence finds a way in the last 3 minutes to score the game-winning goal. And that place, Schneider Arena, people, if you've been there, you know it. It's a very small building, so only about 3,000 fans there, and it went nuts. As Chris Peters, our good friend who's now with ESPN, pointed out on Twitter, he thought the roof was going to come off that building when that game-winning goal went in. It was a great atmosphere, two great teams. They battled. You saw the superstars on both teams really deliver, and it really was a great college hockey game.
Yeah, that building, if you haven't been there, not a huge amount of seats, but even more so, very tight, compact, low ceiling. It just reverberates in there. That must have been something. And we're going to get into it a little bit more when we talk about the PairWise and talk about standings. Providence definitely helped themselves in the PairWise, but it would not be surprising to see a rematch of these teams. UMass taking the season series 2-1. Wouldn't be surprised to see a rematch in the Hockey East semis, or preferably, at least from a hockey watching standpoint, seeing these 2 teams face off for the Hockey East championship.
Yeah, seeding, and we'll get into this a little later, but seeding is still very much up for grabs around the top of that league. So you hope that they can kind of stay out of each other's brackets so that they don't meet in the semis and that they could meet in the finals. These are 2 highly skilled teams. And I think Providence, I had mentioned it, I think they had played a 2-game series against Miami, and that was way back in early January, and they took 3 or 4 points, and I thought that was a very good hockey team at that point. And I said, boy, I think that might be the best all-around team in Hockey East. I still stand by that, but they had a lot of hiccups in between. They weren't playing good hockey there for a while. So they seem to be back. UMass is putting their best foot forward, really, as they have all season. I think that they're probably as good a team as Providence, arguably, and those 2 teams are really showing themselves as the cream of the crop, not just in Hockey East, but maybe nationally. Those are 2 very good teams nationally. Rankings might not show it. PairWise might not show it in terms of how good Providence is, but these are 2 great hockey teams.
And you can't talk about Providence without mentioning Hayden Hockey, who has 7 shutouts this season.
Yeah, you know what? He is just impressive. And it's ironic because you talk to Nate Lehman and he's not as high as you would expect him to be on a goaltender. That's really performing the way hockey is. But, I also know that there's some delicate balances to the way coaches talk about and handle their goaltenders. Sometimes if they know the personality, sometimes they don't want to pump their tires too much, for fear of, losing the ego. So that's might be a big part of it, but he doesn't praise him as much as he used to praise maybe John Gillies. And I guess he probably thinks that they're, two very different goaltenders, but the way Hayden Hockey is playing right now, he's coming up with the big saves at the right time.
You got to wonder from a coach's standpoint, thinking about it with Greg Carville, I'm sure he would have liked the win, but does taking a loss in a tight game like this as you're peaking towards the end of the season, is that a helpful thing? Is that a good thing? Is it better to get one of those out of the way before you get to the end of the season?
Somebody asked him that last night, are they learning from their losses? They don't have a ton of them. That's a great thing for a program like UMass. Only 7 losses on the season. A number of them have come since Christmas time. But as Greg Carville said, he said, I feel like we have learned something from every single loss this season. And that's very important as a coach to know that your team continues to take things away from the games when things don't go in your favor. And they're doing that, and they're doing that well, and they'll be fine from losing this game. It's not one of those teams that I felt like they needed to lose, but I think that they'll learn from that loss.
You mentioned earlier about UMass's fans traveling, and certainly that has been a nice side effect of the team's success this year, getting a little bit of some bandwagon fans. I think they have some wagon T-shirts, but even so, what that says for the NCAAs is pretty big. Wherever they show up in a regional, there's going to be a great atmosphere in that barn, and I'm sure that's got to make the NCAA folks happy.
Yeah, especially I assume they're going to hold on to a number 1 seed, and then they're going to pretty much have to be placed in either Providence or Manchester, New Hampshire. And that's, the actual location of the school, the fact that it's, 2.5 hours west of Boston doesn't matter much, because most of their fans don't actually come from Amherst. Most of their fans come from the greater Boston area, and a ride to Providence or a ride to Manchester is nothing. And this is a school that, very large school. I'm not sure exactly what the student body is, but it's in the 5-figure range, mid to high 5-figure range, and they have tons of alums. You feel like everybody right now is all over UMass hockey. Here's an example. I feel like there's a lot of college hockey on television right now, and I know Holy Cross and Bentley, I think one of these nights were televised, and I said to somebody on social media, if that game was turned off with 2 minutes left, nobody would notice. Well, last night's game between Providence and UMass with 2 minutes left, the NBC Boston, Sports Boston affiliate here in Boston had to turn off for contractual obligations for a Celtics game. Social media blew up, at least my side, where I have a lot of UMass friends. Everybody was watching that game, and everybody was pissed and calling it the Heidi game, if you remember back to the 70s or 80s in football. I mean, that was the type of reaction, and I could almost imagine the hate emails and the hate tweets at NBC Boston last night because of that kind of gap. I know there's contractual obligations that they have to switch over to the Celtics at certain times, but that soured some fans, and that people are actually paying attention because of how active things were on social media.
Well, I was going to bring up Heidi. At least it wasn't for that, but hockey fans are not always big round ball fans, and maybe the Celtics are having a decent season, but yeah, I mean, show it in the lower corner or stream it or something like that. We're going to jump around the different leagues. Why don't we stick with Hockey East right now before we break for a sponsor message? And this one got some attention. Little do you ever see an empty net goal in overtime, especially one that kind of ruins a shutout, and BU did that at Vermont on Friday night.
Vermont and Kevin Sneddon, a very intelligent coach. He knew the scenario going in. His team had to win out. A tie wasn't going to do it. They needed to win every game for the rest of the season, beginning on Friday, if they even wanted a hope of qualifying for the postseason. Of course, Hockey East eliminates their 3 lowest teams in the standings, a new format that they're going with this year. So he was very well aware. The game was scoreless in overtime. Stefanos Lekis had posted, it was a massive number of saves, 30s to 40, somewhere in that range, a high number, let's just say. And with about a minute left, knowing they needed a goal, Sneddon pulls the goalie. An empty net goal is scored for Boston University to win. Okay, you now don't make the playoffs, but what a hard luck. This has been a hard luck season for Lekis. I mean, he leads the league in save percentage, which I always think is a telltale sign of how good a goaltender is, because goals against average doesn't always measure a goaltender's prowess. He leads Hockey East in save percentage, and they're missing the playoffs. He's played every minute of every game. He's got just 12 wins and 18 losses, but he is a phenomenal. I think you put him in a program like, let's say UMass. You put him in UMass, and that kid at this point, honestly might have that team as an undefeated or a one-loss team. He steals games. He almost stole one on Friday night, but instead of getting the shutout, which he did not give up a goal, not only does he not get a shutout, and I checked this with Tim Danahy, who handles the stats for the NCAA hockey, not only does he not get a shutout, he gets credited with the loss. He didn't give up a goal, and he loses a game. It's just such an anomaly, but also so frustrating for a goaltender that has just been so good for really the last 3 years for the Catamounts.
Just quickly in Hockey East, before we break, Maine with a sweep at BC. Things were rocking at Alfond Arena.
Yeah, that's nice to see. People remember those Sean Walsh teams where they were putting that 5,400 or whatever fans in every game, and it was loud. It was a difficult building to play in, and over the years, even at the beginning of the Tim Whitehead era, when he was taking teams to the Frozen Four, still packing it in, and then slowly, as Whitehead's teams were not performing that well, and since Red Gendron got there, he hasn't really had a ton of success, that building started to empty, and that was an atmosphere that just became lost. Well, it was back on Saturday night for Boston College, and a 2-1 win on Friday, I think, may have helped the walk-up sales on Saturday night. Then they go to overtime, win in overtime. And you want to talk, we mentioned Providence, the roof coming off. It really was loud watching the replay of that game-winning goal at Alfond. And that's nice to see. That's something you'd love to see. And Maine has put themselves in a position where they're only at 2 points out of the last home ice spot. Now, they are one of the rare teams that have already played 22 of their games. They only have 2 games left of the final 2 weekends. So it's going to be a tough climb for them. But if they could get a home ice game, man, would that place be rocking.
Well, and as you look at the stats and look at the standings right now in Hockey East and the magic numbers, UMass, the only team that has sewn up home ice in the first round of the playoffs. New Hampshire is eliminated from home ice in the first round, which means you have 6 teams left vying for those 3 positions.
Yeah, and obviously you'd love to say the teams are in the driver's seat, but they're just not, because you got second place, 2 teams tied, UMass Lowell and Northeastern, and then 1 point behind is Providence. They're in 4th place. 2 points behind Providence is BU and Maine, and then 3 points behind them is BC. Now BC, they can technically get home ice. I don't see that happening. They're not playing that well, and they have the toughest schedule, playing both Northeastern for 2 and then Providence the final weekend of the regular season. And 2 of those 3 games are on the road. They're not playing well. This isn't BC's year. So I really would like, technically it's 6 teams battling for 3 spots. I feel like it's 5, and I don't know who finishes where, because any night, you saw UMass Lowell last night. They've been playing very well. They go to play last place Merrimack, and they have to fight for a 3-3 tie. So it's kind of really, you like to talk about parity, and it's strange because the 3 bottom teams that are going to miss the playoffs with 2 weeks left have already defined themselves, and Merrimack's been out really for 3 weeks. But you feel that there's a lot of, these bottom teams certainly love playing spoilers. They're not giving up. And then you've got these other teams that just seem so close in terms of how how good they are on the ice, and what you bring every single night kind of matters.
Well, we got 5 other leagues. Sweeps were rare over the weekend. We'll touch base on that in just a moment. First, a word from our sponsor, the NCAA Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo.
Speed and precision, unrelenting power. This trophy is not given, it must be earned. The 2019 NCAA Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo.
With a shot. Saved by Morris. Takes the shot.
Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 and get your tickets today.
Continuing with USCHO's Weekend Review podcast, I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. And Jim, let's go around the leagues. It was a crazy weekend with very few things getting decided, a few first seeds being decided, but a lot of splits. Let's start with Atlantic hockey. 4 ties on Saturday, 2 on Friday. So 6 tie games out of 10 over the weekend. Having a bye week was American International, but they got the number 1 seed out of the weekend and at least a share of the league title. It's been a great story for Eric Lang's Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, 17 wins. You got to figure if they put 1 or 2 more up for the end of the regular season, get to their tournament, it'll be a 21 season. That's a milestone for AIC, and congratulations to them. They're playing very good hockey. Ironically, the one team that wasn't on the ice this weekend was the only team that really sewed anything up. I think you and I have talked. Bentley has sewed up a first round bye, but everybody else is just battling at this point, and that's kind of crazy that you have so much up for grabs in terms of either getting that bye and getting the first weekend of the playoffs off, or if you're going to play that first weekend, whether you're playing your games at home or the road. It doesn't feel like much of that is decided for too many teams.
Yeah, there are 4 teams now vying for the last 3 positions for the first round bye. That's Air Force, RIT, Sacred Heart, and Mercyhurst. Interesting in that whole thing, RIT loses every tiebreaker with Bentley, Air Force, Sacred Heart, and Mercyhurst. So they've got to do a little bit on their own to get there. The other oddball thing about that, RIT swept American International 4 games this season. So Wednesday night game for RIT at Niagara. The rest of the games happen Thursday, Friday, and Saturday to see who's going to move on. I think we probably won't know for sure until all the games are done on Saturday.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's, somebody posted, it might have been Bruce Siskey, a good friend of ours from out in Duluth radio. And he posted, what is this all about parity in hockey? Here we are going into the final week of the regular season, and the only league that's even close is the ECAC. What he must have been referring to is first place, because every other league, the position wise, besides the first position, is so wide open, and that's obviously a case here in Atlantic hockey.
Yeah, I mean those second through 5th place is separated by 2 points in a 2-point for a win league, so it all comes down to that. Well, as we continue in alphabetical order, let's hop to the Midwest. The Big Ten was a weekend of splits, but with a tie against Michigan on Saturday, Ohio State finally sewed up the regular season title.
Yeah, and good for Ohio State. It has been, I believe I had it as 72 or 74. It was the first year of the CCHA was the last time that Ohio State won a conference title, a regular season title. That's a long time. And this is for a long time for a good program. I think of some of those John Markle teams that, one that reached the Frozen Four back in either the 90s or early 2000s. I mean, there were some good Ohio State teams here, and to never win that regular season title for so long is remarkable. But the Buckeyes got it done. They found a way to get, I think they had to get the extra point in either overtime or a shootout. They did that, and that was enough to turn that tie into the regular season title in the Big Ten.
Meanwhile, everybody else except Michigan State can get a first round home ice. Ohio State gets the bye, and 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 in the Big Ten. So things are still in flux in that conference.
In Ohio State, now they do get a bye, but now what's interesting about the Big Ten, this first round where you play, as you mentioned, 2 plays 7, 3, 6, 4, 5, those are best of 3 series. But when Ohio State gets back to playing, it'll be single elimination. Now it's going to be, the game's going to be played in Columbus, and the other game will be played somewhere else, whoever the other high seed is that remains, and then the Big Ten championship is played at the highest remaining seed. But this is one game on Ohio State's home ice. They've been decent at home, but they've actually been better on the road, 10-2 on the road as opposed to 9-6 at home. So, hey, great to win a regular season title, but it's now kind of a worrisome time, given that you're going to have a week off, and when you get back, you have to win or you're done. If
Ohio State wins the Big Ten, there's only going to be one Big Ten team in the NCAA playoffs. Last year, 3 of the 4 in the Frozen Four were from that conference.
Yeah, big step back, I'd say, but in a way, I'm kind of concerned that it's a parity issue, because you have some teams with good records, but I think these teams beat the heck out of each other within conference play. I'm not positive, and we're not probably going to be able to find out, because these teams aren't going to get tossed into the national tournament like they did last year. Obviously, the tournament success that the Big Ten had last year proved that this conference was excellent. I feel like not much has changed, but I think within the conference, these teams beat each other up incredibly. I mean, even we can just look at this weekend, Wisconsin and Penn State. Wisconsin loses, gives up 8 goals the first night, wins and scores 7 goals the second night. I mean, that's the type of league this was this season in the Big Ten, and I think that's kind of hurting them when it comes to the NCAA tournament.
Moving to the ECAC, Bruce Siskey is right that nothing's decided there. Cornell in the driver's seat as far as controlling its own destiny, but still needs 2 wins to lock up first place. Bunch of teams still have opportunities for a first round bye. A lot to be decided. Only St. Lawrence knows that it's going to end up in last. But it was a tough weekend, Union with losses at Colgate and Cornell. Yale swept, and not only swept, but shut out on the road weekend.
Yeah, and we talked to Keith Allain last week on Spotlight, and he was very positive about his team. Listen, they were playing very good hockey, and there's a reason to be positive. Then somehow, inexplicably, they don't score a goal this weekend. You find upsets like Clarkson beating Quinnipiac. Dartmouth seems to be catching fire at the right time. Brown, you thought that they were on fire, then they go in and get kind of whacked by Harvard on Friday night. It's a little, I think you can take any of those top 8 teams in that league and they're interchangeable. I think the bottom 4 in that league, and Princeton kind of surprises me because I think they were supposed to be a lot better, but the bottom 4 in that league, Colgate, RPI, Princeton, and St. Lawrence, really does feel like it is a different level than the top 8. So when we do talk about that first round of playoffs where the 5 through 8 will host 9 through 12, I would expect the top 4 teams, the home ice teams in that first round, they should all be able to advance, because I do feel like there is a big gap between those top 4 and bottom 4 teams.
But those also are 3 best of 3 series, and if it goes to 3, especially if overtime comes into play, which it always seems to do in the ECAC, you could have an upset or 2 there. Well, let's move on to the NCHC. Only St. Cloud swept on the weekend at Omaha, but some interesting matchups in that. North Dakota splitting with Minnesota Duluth at home, and also Colorado College with a split with Western Michigan. And what a crazy pair of games that turned out to be.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, well, first off, congratulations to St. Cloud State. They take home the Penrose Cup for the regular season championship, something that they clinched this weekend. But the one team I don't want to play in the playoffs right now seems to be Colorado College. They put up, Western Michigan has played some good hockey this year at times, and maybe their offense that can be getting it done. Their defense, it has allowed a lot of goals when you really put them in perspective. I think they'd be bottom 3 in terms of team defense in league play, but putting up 12 goals, which is what Colorado College did on the weekend, that's pretty remarkable. They should have probably had a couple of wins out of that. Unfortunately, they lose Friday night in overtime, but then an 8-2 victory on Saturday where they just exploded offensively. They're going to be a tough team in this playoffs. If you're looking for a team in the bottom 4, obviously if North Dakota stays in the bottom 4, they're dangerous as heck. But Colorado College, that could be a scary team. If you're, say, Western Michigan right now, that after this tough series, they're in a position to have to play CC now, albeit it would be at home, and Western's been an excellent home team as opposed to a road team this year. But CC is just a team you don't want to be playing.
Yeah, and Denver with the split with Miami this weekend puts North Dakota still just 3 points behind. That's one game in a 3-point league. Colorado College on up. Only Miami and Nebraska Omaha can't get home ice. But CC, it's a long shot, but they're still in range for it. But Denver and North Dakota for those last couple of, they're the fourth and fifth team. They're looking for that last home ice spot. Wouldn't it be something if North Dakota was able to squeak it out after being at below 500 in conference right now?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the people in Grand Forks would be thrilled because that's a building that will pack it in. You'll have your 11,000 strong there for a playoff game and create the best atmosphere. And that's, obviously that's a big advantage. You look at their split home road, 10-6-1 at home, 4-8-1 on the road. So, boy, is that an important one for North Dakota. They of any team in that league, that they might need it the most to get that home ice spot. And don't forget that league also has 2 weeks left in the regular season, similar to Hockey East, because it's only an 8-team playoff.
As we turn to the WCHA, the series that stands out is Northern Michigan sweeping Lake Superior at home.
Yeah, we had talked about Lake Superior and the way they were playing, and they were playing very good hockey coming into the weekend. In Northern, they needed that to move ahead into the standings. That gets them up into third place in the standings with a weekend to go, and they get Michigan Tech. Gets them back on track after they had a little bit of a tough go of it at Bemidji. But this is we know that this team had some high expectations. Northern, at times it seemed like they were stumbling this year. They had a great run there at the end of December, beginning of January, and then a few losses in a row when they started playing some of the tougher opponents. But there was Lake State. That was a team that came in very hot and able to knock them off not just once but twice. And that's a 6 points in that league that goes a long way with just one weekend remaining.
And Alabama, Huntsville, and Ferris State vying for the last playoff spot. There are a number of things that could happen there, but Alabama, Huntsville controls its own destiny. Ferris State needs to take care of business and hope things fall its way.
Yeah, Ferris was able to get some points out of this weekend. That was important. Huntsville will head to Bowling Green for this last weekend of the season. Whereas Ferris State, they're going to head to Lake Superior. So neither one of them has a layup. So if Alabama, Huntsville, you almost have to think if they could pull any points out of this weekend series, they probably will be the team to take that 8th and final playoff spot.
Well, let's take one quick look at the PairWise rankings right now to see where things are. Who is definitely in right now, Jim?
I think the teams that I am comfortable giving 100% to St. Cloud and UMass, definitely. I'm really, really, really close to Arizona State just because they only have 2 games left. And if they were to get any points out of this weekend with Minnesota, I think you give it to them. I think Minnesota Duluth, I think Minnesota State are very close. I think Quinnipiac is very close, and Ohio State is pretty close. But there's just enough hockey left to play that if you lose all your games all the way out, you're not controlling your own destiny anymore, and then you're in a situation where you're worried about some of the upsets. Obviously, if any of those teams lose in the playoffs, whoever's beating them is a team that could then take the automatic qualifier and knock them out. It's something just to keep in mind. At the same time, we have a few different leagues, the WCHA, Atlantic Hockey. Well, Atlantic Hockey, only their tournament champion will get in, so that will take up one of the spots. So you can move the Mendoza line, if you will, to 15. You then have Ohio State. If they don't win the Big Ten, that's going to bring a team into the 16 that would not have been there through just an automatic qualifier. So that brings the Mendoza line to 14. You do the same thing with the WCHA. That brings it to 13. Those potentials are there if your top seeds don't hold serve in the tournament. And then you don't know. I mean, we're talking about some decent teams out there that aren't in NCAA position right now. I mentioned Maine. If they ever got hot, they're not going to get in as an at-large bid. So if they get hot and pop themselves up a little bit and win the Hockey East tournament, they'd be stealing a spot. So there's a lot of teams that are going to be maybe eliminated already on that Saturday night, March 22nd, I think it is, or 23rd, whatever the day is there, conference championship weekend, that will be sitting at home and watching because they'll be right on the bubble. Most of them would rather be playing their way in and hoping to take care of it that way. But if you can't, you're going to have teams in situations just like Minnesota Duluth was last year, just hoping to get in. And maybe it's a 0.0001 yet again.
That's going to do it for this weekend's edition of Weekend Review Podcast. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.